You're listening to Civic Media. You can tune into any of our live shows on any radio station across the state with the Civic Media app. Find us in your phone's app store and listen anytime, anywhere.
Welcome to Mid Mornings on Civic Media. My name is Greg Bach. I am your host. I welcome you to this day, to this Monday, to this brand new week. Very happy, very excited to have you here with us this morning. Happy you're spending your time with us today. If you want to be part of the conversation, you can always get in touch with us by calling or texting. The number is the same, 855-752-4842, 855-75-CIVIC. You can leave a comment on the live stream. We are currently streaming on Facebook, YouTube, and the platform that we still call Twitter. Lots of great stuff coming up for you today. After the 9:30 break, we are going to be speaking to Miguel Arandas, who is running for the 1st Congressional District seat, U.S. Congress seat in the 1st District here in Wisconsin. That's Racine, Kenosha, and a little bit west of there as well. We'll talk more about that, why he's running, what got him into the race, and get to know him a little bit more. Lots of new people running this year. It's an election here in Wisconsin. So Miguel Arandas coming up after the 9:30 news. And then in the second hour, after the top of the hour news, we're going to be having Dr. Kristen Lyerly back. We have missed her. It's been a while. And we're going to be talking about all sorts of news coming out of the world of medicine, specifically focusing on the new vaccine recommendations from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, what Wisconsin is doing in turn, as well as what, she is a doctor. She is a practicing doctor. What her thoughts on these new recommendations and what parents should be doing, because there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of maybe fear going on with these new vaccine recommendations, telling parents maybe to slow the schedule down. But we'll be talking more to Dr. Lyerly about that in the second hour. Of course, audio sorbet at 10:35. Heartbreaking Packers loss. What are your thoughts on it? Would love to know. Maybe talk about the Golden Globes that happened last night. And then finally, this shouldn't be a thing. Today it is the For the Dogs edition, so don't go anywhere. We have lots of great show ahead of us. But now we're going to turn it to, we have a guest this morning at the top of the show. As we all know, as we all saw in the news 2 Saturdays ago, the U.S. government, I'm actually going to ask our guest this because some say invaded, some say intervention, but we bombed the capital of Venezuela. We obtained their president and his wife, and we brought them to America. And to really further talk about this more, because I am not an international law expert, but I have one here today. Our first guest this morning is a professor at UW Law who is an expert in international law and human rights. Please welcome to the show, Alexandra Huneeus. Alexandra, thank you so much for being here for today. We really appreciate your time. How are you this morning? And real quick, how was your weekend?
I had a good weekend,
Good.
thank you. And
Excellent.
Thanks so much for having me on the show.
So I want to start this off really basic because, it's kind of a two-parter right up top. First of all, tell us about, what you do as an international law expert. And last week we saw some pundits giving their thoughts that international law doesn't exist at all. So tell us about what you do as an international law expert, and tell us, does international law actually not exist anymore?
So I teach international law at the University of Wisconsin, and my research and writing is all about international law. We've just published an edited volume called Latin American International Law in the 21st Century that was all written prior to the Trump administration's taking office, and focusing and recasting what Latin American international law is. So that's what I do. And when I teach, I take head on this question of, does international law really exist? Because it really is a theme in the U.S., and a lot of students come into the class and into even law school wondering whether it exists, because it is a legal system. I assert it is a legal system, but it's so different from domestic law. It's so different from how we see law working within the United States, and with how we imagine it works in the United States, where you have, if someone, commits a crime, you have a police investigation, and then you have a prosecutor, and then the prosecutor, issues a warrant, and then the executive carries it out, and this centralized hierarchical enforcement system that exists in domestic law doesn't exist in international law.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that it's not law. It
Yes.
just has it's just a decentralized system of law that doesn't have this hierarchical authority and this way of enforcing itself that domestic law has. So it makes it hard, that you have to really understand international law, you have to be able in your mind to separate legality from enforcement through police.
Which
and that's really hard for us to do because whenever we see law domestically, they go hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, when I think of international law, I think of a lot, as you said, decentralized. There's a lot more conversation happening between countries, and some would say, well, this isn't a crime, and some will say this is a crime, and it's about coming together and having consensus to enforce what you're saying. Now, with what happened in Venezuela 2 Saturdays ago, and I know you heard this, I truly don't know how to describe what happened, because some people say it's an attack, some say an intervention, as far as international law goes, as far as what you saw, what would describe what the U.S. did that Saturday? And are there any new developments we've seen coming out of Venezuela? We see that Nicolas Maduro and his wife are in New York to stand trial, but what do you see as an expert that we might not be seeing as developments in that country?
Those are two very different questions.
Yeah.
But to address the first one, what is this? I think it's an intervention. Of course, it is an intervention in another state's domestic affairs. You're taking away the head of state, and it is an attack. It is an armed attack, and that particular wording is very significant in international law, because once you open an armed conflict, right, an international armed conflict, then the laws of war kick into play. So I think there's no question here at this point that what happened last Saturday was the beginning of an international armed conflict. Whether the armed conflict is ongoing might be more debatable, because there hasn't been engagement, but there is a blockade. So likely it is an ongoing international armed conflict. Therefore, the laws of war apply.
If you're just joining us right now on Mid Mornings on Civic Media, we are speaking to Alexandra Huneeus, who is a professor at UW Law and an expert on international law and human rights, with a specific concentration, as you said, in South America. That what your answer tells me, like, it makes complete sense. When you add in the fact that we took the leader and his wife and brought them to America, what does that move push this? I mean, the fact that there hasn't been a declaration of war, it feels like, because of such a brazen, unexpected attack, and then you take the leader away, what else does that do to the whole conflict? I mean, I've in my life, I've never seen this before, so I'm really, it's a new experience as a citizen. What does that mean for the whole action as on a whole?
Yeah, and I think this gets to the second question that you asked, what's going on the ground, because you take away the head of state. It's and not only is it arguably a breach of international law, because of the intervention in the sovereign affairs of the other state, and because of starting an armed conflict, which itself is a breach of the fundamental norms of the international order, that you only use force in self-defense. But it also creates a great risk within Venezuela, because now there's everyone is scrambling to figure out what happens next and who's in charge. And there's, of course, a potential of some pretty troubling outcomes to the next steps, as we've seen in other countries when the United States intervenes in order to create regime change. It's one thing to topple the person who's in charge, and quite another to put in place a stable and hopefully democratic subsequent order. So I think in Venezuela so far, what's happened is that the vice president has assumed leadership of the country, which means that the Chavistas, right, the party led by Maduro, is still in charge. And there's a real question as to, well, what does that mean for this whole idea of regime change, right? Like the US is there to create regime change, but they've kind of given their blessing for the second in command, pretty much handpicked by Maduro, and a hardcore Chavista to assume power. So we will see. It's unclear yet how the United States sees this playing out. The United States administration has not shared with us any sort of planning that they have over what are the next steps, right? We don't know what the ideas are. They going to call for elections? What's going to be the role of the opposition, right? The Trump administration had been working closely with Maria Machado, who was sort of the leader of the opposition, very popular leader within Venezuela, but she was suddenly sidelined, right? And instead, the vice president, Dilce Rodriguez, was put in power, or sort of given the United States blessing to assume power. So, so then the question is, how are those two forces going to work together, and with the United States, in order to put Venezuela on track for what will hopefully be a peaceful transition to democracy and stabilization of the economy, and hopefully creating the conditions for those 8 million people have left Venezuela since the Chavismo started, and in a country of only 38 million people. So hopefully creating the conditions for an end to one of the world's worst refugee crises.
And that's the thing too, is like the time, that's a whole other conversation, is like the history of Venezuela, how Maduro has impacted. But what that is, the information there, with the leader of the opposition party, who's a Nobel Peace Prize winner, who thanked Trump in her speech, said, "Thank you for the encouragement," has been sidelined. That brings up so many questions. But one of the things I want to talk about, we're going to take a small break and come back. And when we come back, I want to talk about the fact that, as you mentioned, this is sort of a new type of, quote, regime change plan, if you will, in the U.S. history, as far as I'm seeing, and with Venezuela. And I also want to talk about what the capture of Maduro means for future actions from either the U.S. or other countries, as a way of saying, this is precedent now. They did this. We can do it. So when we come back, we're going to speak more with Alexandra Huneeus, who is a professor at UW Law and an expert in international law as well as human rights. Don't go anywhere. If you have any questions, comments, please give us a call, 855-752-4842, 855-75-CIVIC. You're right here on Mid-Morning Civic Media. My name is Greg Bach. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned, stay informed, and stay close.
You're listening to Civic Media. Stay up to date on the latest news and information for your local community and Wisconsin by signing up for our free email newsletter. Visit civicmedia.us/email to get started.
Welcome back to Mid-Mornings on Civic Media. My name is Greg Bach. I'm your host today. We are coming to you live from Radio Park in Racine. If you want to be part of the conversation, 855-752-4842, 855-75-CIVIC. Leave a comment on that live stream. We are on Facebook, YouTube, and the platform we still call Twitter. Lots of great shows still ahead of all of us, including a conversation with Miguel Arandas, who is running for the 1st District U.S. Congress seat that is up for election this fall, as well as a conversation in the second hour with Dr. Kristen Lyerly regarding vaccines, vaccine scheduling, and how Wisconsin's dealing with the new information from the Department of Health and Human Services. But right now, we are speaking with Alexandra Huneeus, who is a professor at UW Law. She is also an expert in international law and human rights. We are talking about the armed attack in Venezuela 2 Saturdays ago and the capture of Nicolas Maduro as well as his wife, bringing them back to New York to stand trial, talking about the impacts and also, the perception of international law in America and abroad. And we were talking a little bit between the break, and one thing you brought up, and I think that's very important to discuss, is that this was all done in the guise of illicit drugs. We were told that it was because of drug trafficking. And what does that, when you hear that and what you see as far as Venezuela and what you know about the country, how does that translate to you as far as a reason given to Americans for doing what they did?
Yeah, it's been so interesting to watch the use of, drug trafficking in both Operation Southern Spear, which was the attacks on the boats trafficking in the Caribbean, and then Operation Absolute Resolve, which is this direct attack into Venezuelan soil and taking and arresting of Maduro. In the first, and when they're attacking the boats in the Caribbean, Operation Southern Spear, the drug trade was explained to be itself an armed attack on the United States, and that the United States was using force in self-defense, and using sort of the language of the laws of war. With Operation Absolute Resolve, it's this sort of flipped, and now the use of force was used in order to create law enforcement, right? So this was framed publicly as a law enforcement action aimed at arresting Maduro on drug trafficking and weapons-related charges, rather than as a declaration of war or a regime change exercise. And then, Maduro arrives in the U.S. and is taken to the headquarters of the Drug Enforcement Administration. So, the justification for this operation is the idea that Venezuela is a hub for drug trafficking that poses a threat to the health and security of the United States. But the interesting things about this, as has been widely reported, is that Venezuela really is not the largest source of cocaine by any means. That would be, neighboring Colombia. And the real killer here is fentanyl, which comes not from Venezuela, but through Mexico. And based on U.S. drug enforcement data, Venezuela is responsible for just this tiny amount of the heroin, cocaine, meth, fentanyl imported into the U.S. So that's, it seems not to be the true motivation here. And then, of course, you have to remember, Trump just pardoned former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez.
Yes.
And not enough can be said about the contrast, of indicting Maduro, going into Venezuela, arresting him on drug trafficking, weeks after pardoning someone who had been found guilty of conspiring to import cocaine into the United States and significant amounts. So that, it's a pretty striking contrast. And then the third thing about this that's interesting for me as someone who works on human rights and international criminal law, is that Maduro has been involved, like the Maduro regime has been involved in well-documented human rights violations that have been investigated. A UN independent fact-finding force just in December found that officials of Venezuela's National Guard have committed serious human rights violations and that amount to crimes against humanity and repression on political grounds. And so they cite to arbitrary deprivation of life, arbitrary detention, sexual and gender-based violence, torture, and other cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment. So it's not clear to me why the administration has not chosen to pursue these kinds of charges. They might come later.
Yeah.
Perhaps they will, but but it's interesting. To me, it's perhaps another indicator of an erosion of the norms that have been built up, especially since World War II, in the international legal order, that really prioritize the dignity of the individual human, right? That's been such a focal point. And in past interventions, the U.S. has always prioritized, human rights, even if they've just used it as a pretextual excuse. That's been, what they try to focus on. So before the invasion of Afghanistan, there was a lot of talk of the human rights of women in that country. Here we're seeing a shift where that doesn't seem to be a focal point of the justification that the administration is using, which is an interesting development.
I mean, honestly, and we only have about a minute left. I mean, I think it's easier to describe this whole action to make it palatable to certain Americans as literally just screaming out, drugs are bad. And we're like, great. And we move on. And it's easier to digest that subject matter than it is the complex and nuanced topics of human rights, human rights violations, crimes against humanity, things of that nature. But drugs are bad. That's easy. People can take that. But Alexandra Huneeus is an expert in international law and human rights, also a professor at UW Law. Alexandra, thank you so much for being here today. I would like to keep this conversation going for the future because I think this is something people need to know about, not just Venezuela, but abroad. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, Alexandra.
Thanks for having me. It's great talking to you.
You as well. When we come back, we'll be speaking with Miguel Aranda, who is running for Congress of the 1st District here in Wisconsin. Don't go anywhere. You are on Civic Media. Stay close. Welcome back to Mid Mornings on Civic Media. My name is Greg Bach. I am your host, your buddy, your pal, and we are here coming to you live from Radio Park in Racine. If you want to be part of the conversation, you can always call, text 855-752-4842, 855-75-CIVIC. You can always leave that comment on the live stream as well. We are currently streaming on Facebook, YouTube, and that platform that Yes, we still call Twitter. Lots of great shows still ahead. We have at the top of the second hour, we have Dr. Kristen Lyerly, who's going to be here talking about vaccines, talking about food pyramids, talking about all the things that have happened since we've not all the things, but talking about all the main stories coming out of the world of medicine that really affect all of us here in Wisconsin and beyond. And then we got this audio sorbet talking Packers. And this shouldn't be a thing. Today is the For the Dogs edition. But right now, we're going to kick it over to an interview that I did last week with a young man who is running for the 1st congressional district seat for Congress here in Wisconsin. Miguel Arandas is the guest, and we had sat down. It'll be 2 segments. Very much looking forward to you hearing this. And this is a pre-recorded, just want to let you know. So, pre-recorded interview with Mr. Arandas talking about his campaign, his story, and why he got involved in this year's election. So go ahead and listen to that right now. I am very excited to talk to our next guest. He is running for Congress, for the U.S. Congress in the 1st District here in Wisconsin. Miguel Aranda is our guest. Miguel, good morning. How are you today?
Hey, good morning, Greg. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be over here, and it's a pleasure. And just talk a little bit more about myself with your audience.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so you are running for the U.S. Congress for the 1st District here in Wisconsin. First of all, tell us about the district and tell us a little bit about yourself, your story.
Yeah, so the congressional district one is a big one. So I've already won. I asked a couple of friends before I put my name in, and they're like, what? Are you sure you want to do it? Especially coming in from Whitewater, Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. So, it has a population, including the college students, maybe 15,000. So the region goes pretty much from South Milwaukee, Oak Creek, St. Francis, Franklin, and then, you got your Racine area down to Kenosha, and then it goes all the way on the west side. So that's going to be Rock County, so Janesville, Beloit. And so I'm coming in from I'm the only candidate, even against Iowa, Walworth County. Mm-hmm. So Whitewater has parts of Jefferson County, Walworth County, and Rock County. And so I was looking into all of that district. And, I am Latino. I'm a Latino male. Yeah. 35, just a little bit. So I'll transition a little bit about myself as well. And so I grew up in Whitewater. So I grew up in that Walworth area, county, you know, the Elkhorn, the Lake Geneva. I have a lot of family who immigrated from Mexico, and they came around that area. And so I'm 35. I am happily married. My wife and we got 3 children. They're 10, 8, and 4.
Okay.
We're really happy. You know, they all go, public education is a passion of mine. You know, I work at the university, but all 3 of them, well, 2 of them attend it, and then our third one is going to be entering school soon.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've been really busy. You know, and my wife is 33, and so when we talk about issues later on about working families, we literally live it. We talk about it almost every night, our finances. And so, and to add on to that, I am on the school board at Whitewater. I'm the second longest serving board member, vice president at the moment, but interestingly, I'm also the youngest on the board. So a lot of people question me, well, you're pretty young. And I'll be like, yeah, but I'm also the only one with a history of actual public service. And do you want to guess, Greg, how much we get paid being on the Whitewater School Board?
$10 million a year, sir. Is that a good guess?
Oh, I wish. I wish.
And how much, I mean, is it?
Oh, it's, well, we're given the opportunity $15 an hour.
Okay.
But at that point, we just waive it. Yeah, it's not even worth the paperwork at this point.
It's for serving the community. That's what you're in it
Exactly.
for. You're not. I don't know anybody who serves on a school board because they want the big bucks. So now, what you just described for me, Miguel, is somebody who is rooted in a community, rooted in Whitewater with family, and you have a wife and children, and you serve on the school board.
Yes.
So you have interest in your community. You have interest in your district, your state.
Yes.
So tell me, what was the catalyst to go from school board to say, I'm going to run for the 1st congressional district? When did you decide to run? When did you announce? And what are the things that pushed you towards this journey?
Wow. No, I really appreciate that question so much. And I definitely want to bring in a big, different perspective to the race. I have been a volunteer within the Democrat Party for 15 years. You know, I've stuck it out through the wins and through the losses. And I've always shared my opinion. It's not always a popular one. But one of the biggest things that I have, because I've also been in Whitewater in our Economic Development Committee, right? And there's just a lot of frustrations that I saw that at the federal level that we could alleviate of what there's so much that local government can do. And there's so much red tape that we just can't do it. And then being on the school board, you just see the defunding of education. I'm going to blast them out, you know, Republicans with the state surplus, and then our teachers, their salaries, their health benefits, and just all this accumulation of frustrations. And then within our Latino population, and then just talking to other families with children who maybe don't attend your regular Democrat meetings, their voices are not heard. Or they don't have that opportunity. And, you know, I am unapologetic. I've told you, you should change your messaging, maybe focus a little bit more on healthcare, this and that. I'm not saying I'm against healthcare or farming or all that. I still support it 100%. But the big reason is affordable and accessible childcare.
Yeah.
100%. Especially in rural areas. And that's the other frustration is I'm bringing in an rural viewpoint that you might not hear from someone coming in from the more metropolitan areas, you know, Janesville, Beloit, and Racine. So they're childcare deserts. It's really hard to find staff. You know, the salary is another one, the wages. For me, I'm privileged. I'm done. I don't need the childcare. You know, I have the privilege of having family around the area. You know, grandma, she wanted grandchildren, and so we got really lucky there. But I see a lot of my peers, you know, 30s or even younger, they want to have kids, and they'll have good jobs. They'll be an accountant for the state, a plumber, and the trade. But then it gets to the point, where's there that level of accessibility, right? Like, oh, now I have to drive an hour to go to that daycare because that's the only one available to us that has those certain hours, or we're not on a wait list. You know.
Well, And I think you bring up something that's very important there, is that I feel like when people speak about democratic politics, there's a certain belief that the rural area of the community are going to be not represented, and that's not true at all. You are bringing that recognition and that need for services to that area that we've talked about on this show for years now, that that policies that come out from Washington and from Madison, regardless of the side, can really impact the rural community.
Yes, absolutely. And then just being a vocal point and a megaphone, that way bringing attention, like being a board member, you hear a lot of concerns is the positive way I'm going to put it. But, for our teachers, the lack of support, and you just see the surplus at the state level, and then now what's going on with the Department of Education, special education, like Republicans, they promised the 45 reimbursement rate, and now they're giving that 32. And so it's extremely frustrating. And this has really put a focal point on this. And I totally, when I saw Senator Sanders put the proposal for a minimum of $60,000 for teachers, 100% on that commitment. Yeah.
Well, on that, as far as you're talking about affordability, that's something we talk about a lot here in the state and on the shows and whatnot. What are the other points of your campaign that you want people to know about? There are real concerns for you that you are going to be working towards and informing people as you are running over the next, 8 to 11 months, depending on the outcomes.
Yeah, so the message is very simple. I know sometimes it doesn't click with certain folks that I've been connecting with. I would say very simple. That way people can remember it. It's a good home and a good job, preferably a union one. But just so those who are union members in Walworth County, there really isn't any unions there, sadly. And so that's what I've been trying to help with is the increase of union membership there as well through the campaign. But being on the Economic Development Committee for the city for a little bit, we try to be careful, but, housing, there's a lack of housing. When you say affordable, then right away, just working with Republicans to say, I don't want to use my taxpayer money for people that can't afford a house. Well, the thing is, talking to a lot of younger voters, they just can't find that good job. And so that's a good, okay, so if we can guarantee them a good job, then we don't really have to subsidize a lot of the, housing for them. But then the construction costs and the labor costs keep increasing. And so it's just this like circle that affects all these factors with one another. And then also the other thing, so a lot of our rural towns, I'm going to say it, they're dying. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, a member of Kiwanis Group, and a lot of my friends are retirees, and I get asked a lot, how can we get more young people? And so it's not just like a political party trying to recruit or anything like that, but how can we get more young people in service and volunteer? And when I talk to my peers, they're exhausted. They go work, if they have overtime, trying maybe 2-3 jobs, they're exhausted. They can't. Volunteer service is something they are not even thinking about. And so if we offered them just, hey, maybe just one job.
Yes.
And my dad had that privilege, and he's comfortable now, but that one job, 8-hour shift, if they want to do overtime, that's great, right? But, they should be within those needs, that job, get a mortgage, a working car too, preferably, and avoid all those car issues, and then that's when you can start talking about getting more people involved in their communities, and for the housing too. A big platform of mine is, and this kind of relates a lot to the Latino constituency. I know it's going to be immigration reform. And I know sometimes there's polling, and this is what concerns me and why I put my name in the race as well, is, immigration is usually 4th or 5th, right, when you see some of the polling. But I know a lot of and when I look at some of those numbers, I look at how they did the polling. So I'm looking, did you speak to Spanish speakers, right? Did you maybe make that effort? Do you have someone in your crew that speaks Spanish and ask those questions? Because I've door knocked, I've canvassed in Spanish, and I am collecting different information. And immigration tends to be one of the top priorities within our Latino constituency. And they do all the everything that needs to be done. They follow the rules. They try to, but a lot of people don't know the difficulties. I've been through it. I grew up in a mixed status family household.
Mm-hmm.
I've had family members go with the process, and so I know the level of difficulty. There is no line.
Don't go anywhere, folks. We've got more with our interview with Miguel Aranda, who is a candidate for Wisconsin's first congressional district. When we come back, we're going to be talking about his work within more discussion about his work within the Latino population, as well as the day that we did this interview, the shootings in Minneapolis happened between an ICE agent and Renee Good. So don't go anywhere. We're going to have more with Miguel coming up at the other side of the break. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Mid-Morning on Civic Media. My name is Greg Bach. Stay tuned. Stay close.
You're listening to Civic Media. Find the latest news, information, and archives of all your favorite shows on the Civic Media website, civicmedia.us.
Welcome back. You are listening to Mid-Mornings on Civic Media. My name is Greg Bach. I'm your host. I'm your buddy. I'm your pal. We are here today with candidate Miguel Aranda, who is running for the Congressional District number 1 here in Wisconsin for the U.S. Congress. And we've been talking about his story, his background, why he is running, what he is running for in the 1st Congressional District, and how his experiences connect to all of us who live in that area. And Miguel, something you brought up earlier that I want to touch on again is your deep commitment and love for your Latino community.
Yes.
And in 2024, in the election, there was talk, of a movement of the Latino vote to the right.
Yes.
Now, I think media is media, and they want to get headlines, and they'd love to be able to put that up there. I want to know, one, your thoughts on that alone, but also when the big machine of politics, regardless of party, wants to approach the Latino community, what do they get wrong? How can they do better? And what are the myths that they think that make up your community where they treat you almost as a monolith?
Yeah. Oh, I was so frustrated when I heard that.
Yeah.
That is just my personal opinion, and that's a big reason, being a Latino male.
Mm-hmm.
One of many reasons I put my name, because just to show other Latinos that, hey, it's still important to get involved in politics.
Mm-hmm.
But when I heard, the Latino males are all moving conservative, and the Republicans, even though George Bush back in like 2004 got pretty good margins too, that they're all moving right. And I got so frustrated because the reason I got frustrated is what I was listening to is I already saw like Trump having a good chance of winning.
Yeah.
From what I was hearing. And again, going to, like inflation, not good jobs, that comes down to those kitchen table issues.
Yes.
Your utilities. And that's a big reason where my messaging comes in is what I'm hearing is people are not being heard.
Yes.
And then when I heard that, I was like, that, don't say that. And obviously, I don't have that level of influence. I'm an MSNBC writer, Fox News, to say any of that. But one thing I'm also now warning Democrats too, because, with the big wins in New Jersey and Virginia, they're saying, we got all the Latinos back, right?
Yes.
And I'm like,
we're fine. The work's done, guys.
Yeah, we're done. I'm like, and I'm still raising the flag. No, we are not.
Nope.
I will 100% will bet that if we don't show them, a lot of our Latino constituency, Spanish-speaking folks, that we can do the work as Democrats, I can promise you they will vote Republican again. Yes.
Yeah. Now, I had other questions I want to ask, but I would be remiss if I didn't bring up that when this interview is being done, we have found out just a few hours before that ICE agents had killed a woman in Minnesota. Miguel, I know I'm sorry we don't have a lot of time to talk about it, but I do know that after this interview, you're going up to Milwaukee for a protest. What was your thoughts when you heard this?
I'm pissed.
Yeah.
I'm going to Milwaukee right now. I don't know what the situation. I don't know the full story. I usually wait on the story, but the level of recklessness and lack of training that ICE agents have, from what I've been reading, is just a disaster. It's a disgrace. And so what ended up happening, right? I'm not sure. I believe there was a protester. They just didn't stop, and they one of the ICE agents shot her through the window.
Mm-hmm.
They could have gotten, at least from what I've talked to local law enforcement, to avoid more a dangerous scene, they could have just taken the license plate and find that individual later. Yeah. They did not have to do that, and it's violence that's unnecessary, and that should not be happening at all.
I'd like to say I'm sure everyone agreed, but no, we're already seeing reports from various quote unquote luminaries from the GOP who are automatically placing blame everywhere but where it belongs, in my opinion. That is my opinion. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to get your quick thought on that. And I know because it is still very fresh story. There's still information coming out as we know more. And I'm sure you're going to have these conversations on the campaign trail. And I want to bring it now back to the campaign. What, in 2026, you've announced there is a primary happening in August. What are you going to do to bring light to yourself that's going to separate yourself from the other candidates in the Democratic field as we wrap up this interview with Miguel Aranda?
Yeah, so just running against style. So if I were the candidate, I've looked through the past, I've looked through the numbers. Mm-hmm. Every Democrat candidate loses by double digits.
Yes.
So double margins, and with style. And what I will bring to the table is not only I would be the only one coming in from Walworth County or that that Earl feel. Mm-hmm. I actually have to work with Republicans and get stuff done. Mm-hmm. And then our Latino constituency. And so, for example, Southeast Wisconsin is very particular, right? And so we always want to look for candidates who fit that profile or their demographic. Yeah. And being Latino, we haven't been heard. We're not always in those certain circles that maybe have that level of influence. Mm-hmm. And so, again, I put my name in there so they can see that representation. Yeah. That I've already got a lot of people have door knocked and they've been motivated and they're ready to go to vote, even if they might not be able to volunteer, but they got it on their calendar. Yeah. And so with Southeast Wisconsin, that's something that has been missing. And that has been one of my frustrations within the party. It's like, guys, we have such a huge potential right here. And so one story that I've shared is when I ran for school board twice, I always try to bring other Democrat candidates with me, right? Yeah. So up and down the ballots, a lot of my Latino constituency will say, well, I only want your sign, right? I don't want other Democrat sign. Yeah. And another story that just recently I went to a college university and to Latino college students and asked them, I did the whole spiel, right? Yeah. What I'm fighting for. And then I kind of saw blank faces. And then I said, well, let me go back and do you all know who your current representative is? And do you want to guess the level percentage, Greg?
What was it?
0%.
And if you want to know who your representative is, you can go to myvote.wi.gov. We want to make sure you know who represents you and who are your leaders in your communities. myvote.wi.gov. For more information on Miguel, go to Aranda4Wisconsin.com. I'm sure we'll be talking to him more throughout the campaign season. Want to thank him for his time. Don't go anywhere. When we come back after the news, we've got Dr. Kristen Lyerly talking about all things medicine, including vaccine schedules, the food pyramid, and just, anything else she's seeing as a practicing doctor. She is also the host of the Dr. Kristen Lyerly Show, of course. But don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. Stay close. This is Mid Mornings on Civic Media. My name is Greg Bach.
The national news cycle never stops, but it can be hard to find news about your local community. Civic Media is dedicated to providing quality local and state news coverage across Wisconsin. With the Civic Media app, you can get notifications about local stories that matter to you and your community. Find the free Civic Media app in your phone's app store and choose notifications from the menu to tell us what kind of news you want to hear about.